Kyle Busch won more races than any driver in NASCAR history across all three national series, 234 victories across 2 decades. He was 41, preparing for the Coca-Cola 600, and had just signed on for another season. 3 days before race day, he called for an ambulance. 1 day later, he was unresponsive inside a racing simulator. Within 24 hours, NASCAR lost its most decorated active driver, and the world lost a man still in the middle of a story. Las Vegas is not a city that produces NASCAR legends. It produces gamblers, performers, and survivors. Kyle Thomas Busch was born there on May 2, 1985, the younger son of Tom and Gay Busch, and in many ways he carried all three of those qualities onto every track he ever touched. The Busch household didn't need to introduce Kyle to motorsports. It was already everywhere he looked. His older brother Kurt was racing before Kyle could read. Their father Tom had spent years around cars and competition. By the time Kyle was 6 years old, he wasn't playing with toy cars. He was being taught how to drive one. A real lesson, real feedback, real expectations. For years later, at age 10, he wasn't just watching Kurt race from the sidelines. According to Celebrity Net Worth, Kyle was already serving as his brother's crew chief, studying strategy, reading the car, making calls. Most kids that age are worried about homework. Kyle Busch was worried about tire wear. By 13, he was competing himself. By 16, he had formally launched his driving career in NASCAR's developmental circuits, entering a world dominated by men with decades of experience, calloused hands, and no patience for teenagers who hadn't earned their place yet. Kyle didn't ease in. He pushed. His aggression behind the wheel was immediate and obvious. He drove like someone who genuinely believed second place was a personal failure. That attitude made him fast. It also made him enemies. Fans booed him early. Rivals called him reckless. The criticism was loud and consistent, and Kyle Busch drove straight through all of it. In 2005, at just 20 years old, he earned NASCAR Cup Series Rookie of the Year honors. The sport had seen talented rookies before, but there was something different about the way this one moved through traffic, something that felt less like skill and more like compulsion. Success at that speed always comes with a price. The pressures building behind the scenes were only beginning to show. Kyle Busch got his first driving lesson at age 6 and was crew chief for his brother at 10. At what age did you find the thing you were born to do? Tell us in the comments. What followed that rookie season was not a gradual climb. It was a sustained assault on the record books that lasted nearly 2 decades. Between 2005 and 2026, Kyle Busch became something NASCAR had never quite seen before. Not just a great Cup Series driver. Not just a champion. He became the winningest driver across all three of NASCAR's national series, the Cup, the Xfinity, and the Truck combined. According to NASCAR.com, his total win count reached 234 by 2026. No driver in the modern era came close to that number. Not even close. His 2 Cup Series championships came in 2015 and 2019, both with Joe Gibbs Racing. 2 titles separated by 4 years, both earned in brutal, wire-to-wire playoff battles against the best drivers in the sport. The 2015 title was particularly remarkable. He had missed the first 11 races of that season due to a leg injury suffered at Daytona and still found a way to win it all. But numbers alone don't capture what he was doing on the track. In 2018, he accomplished something no driver in NASCAR's modern era had managed before. He won at every active track on the Cup Series schedule in a single season. Every single one. The tour ends at Charlotte Motor Speedway with the Coca-Cola 600, and Busch won that too. A 600-mile race. The longest on the calendar. He won it like it was routine. That same race, the Coca-Cola 600, was the one he was preparing to run on the weekend he died. Off the track, the financial picture was just as dominant. According to SpotTrack, his estimated career earnings reached approximately $250 million across his time in NASCAR. During his peak years, annual income ranged between $15 million and $20 million, built from a combination of race winnings, team salary, and endorsement deals. His most visible commercial partnership was with Mars, Incorporated, the company behind M&M's. For years, that candy-colored paint scheme on his number 18 Toyota was one of the most recognized cars in American motorsports. In 2010, he founded Busch Motorsports, a truck series team that quickly became one of the most competitive organizations in that division. It was a smart move, a deliberate one. It meant his income and his influence inside NASCAR extended well beyond whatever car he personally happened to be driving. By any measurable standard, wins, titles, earnings, longevity, Kyle Busch had built one of the most complete careers the sport had ever produced. And he was still adding to it. The version of Kyle Busch that most people knew was loud, aggressive, unapologetic, the driver who would bump a competitor out of the way and not lose a second of sleep over it. That reputation was real, but it was only part of the picture. Away from the track, his life looked nothing like his public image. On December 31st, 2010, Kyle married Samantha Sarchinella, a former Chicago Bears cheerleader, in a televised New Year's Eve ceremony. It was a headline moment, but what came after the wedding was far more private and far more painful. For years, the couple struggled with infertility. They didn't hide it. Instead, they turned it into something larger than themselves. Together, they launched the Samantha and Kyle Busch Bundle of Joy Fund, a foundation built specifically to support infertility awareness and help other families navigate the same quiet heartbreak they had lived through. In a sport not known for vulnerability, that kind of openness stood out. Their son, Brexton Locke Busch, was born in 2015, the same year Kyle won his first Cup Series championship. A daughter followed in 2021. By all accounts, fatherhood changed the texture of who he was, even if the competitive fire never dimmed. In interviews as recently as 2025, Kyle was direct about his retirement timeline. He wasn't going anywhere, he said, until Brexton was old enough to compete at the national level. That was his marker, his reason to keep going. By that calculation, he had at least 7 or 8 more years left in the sport. He was planning a long future. According to Celebrity Net Worth, his estimated net worth at the time of his death stood at approximately $80 million, built from race earnings, endorsements, real estate holdings, and his motorsports business ventures. People who worked closely with him described someone far more measured and self-aware than the highlight reel suggested. Someone who understood exactly how he was perceived and had simply decided it didn't matter. But that perception of the brash, untouchable winner followed him into his final season. And so did something else. Something physical. Something quiet. Something that, looking back, had been building for longer than anyone realized. The records were intact. The contract was signed. The car was ready for Charlotte. And somewhere in the days before race weekend, something had already gone very wrong. NASCAR driver Brad Keselowski was one of the first to speak publicly after the news broke. He told reporters that he had known Kyle Busch wasn't feeling well in the days leading up to the Coca-Cola 600. He didn't go into specifics, but he said something else that was worth paying attention to. He said that running multiple races on the same weekend, which Busch had done just 1 week before his death, competing in a Truck Series event on top of his Cup obligations, puts an enormous physical toll on a driver's body. Most drivers know this. Most push through anyway. The reason, Keselowski explained, is simple and brutal. There is no shortage of drivers ready to take any seat the moment it becomes available. Stepping back, even for one weekend, even when the body is sending clear signals, feels like an invitation for someone else to take what you built. So drivers don't stop. They manage. They push. They race. Kyle Busch had been doing exactly that for 22 consecutive full-time NASCAR seasons. On Wednesday, May 20th, 2026, the signals became impossible to ignore. At a training complex in Concord, North Carolina, someone placed a 911 call requesting an ambulance. According to the recording obtained by CNN, the caller reported that Kyle Busch was lying on a bathroom floor inside the facility, experiencing shortness of breath and coughing up blood. The caller confirmed he was awake. then made one specific request: turn off the sirens on arrival. That detail is small, but it says something. Even in that moment, the instinct was to keep things quiet. Busch was treated, and the situation appeared to stabilize. But later that same day, while running tests inside a Chevrolet racing simulator at the facility, he became unresponsive. He was transported by emergency services to a hospital in Charlotte. The gap between that first 911 call and the simulator collapse was less than 24 hours. 22 seasons, 2 championships, 234 wins. And the body that had carried all of it through 2 decades of punishment had reached its limit in a room full of screens and steering wheels. 3 days before the race, he had won before and planned to win again. The warning signs were there days before. If you want to understand how fast things can go wrong and what the sport knew and didn't say, stay with this channel. Subscribe and don't miss what comes next. Thursday, May 21st, 2026 started like any other race week morning in Charlotte. Teams were preparing. Crews were working. The Coca-Cola 600 was 3 days away. By the end of that day, NASCAR would never be the same. In the early hours of Thursday, Richard Childress Racing confirmed that Kyle Busch had been hospitalized with a severe illness and would not be competing that weekend. For a sport built on toughness, that kind of announcement is rare. Drivers race through pain. They tape up injuries and climb back in. The fact that a team was publicly confirming a hospitalization meant the situation was serious enough that silence was no longer an option. Hours later, the second statement came. This one was joint: NASCAR, Richard Childress Racing, and the Busch family together. Kyle Busch had died. He was 41 years old. The racing world sat completely still. 2 days later, on May 23rd, the family provided the medical details the public had been waiting for. According to the statement released by the Busch family, severe pneumonia had progressed into sepsis, resulting in rapid and overwhelming associated complications. They asked for privacy. They offered no further elaboration. Sepsis is not a condition that announces itself loudly. It begins as an infection, in this case, pneumonia that had taken hold in Busch's lungs. Then the body's immune response, instead of containing the threat, begins to spiral. It starts attacking healthy tissue, organs come under pressure, blood pressure drops, and in severe cases, the deterioration can move from manageable to fatal within hours. Medical professionals consistently describe it as one of the most time-sensitive emergencies in existence. Every hour without intervention narrows the window significantly. The 911 timeline from Wednesday tells its own story. Shortness of breath, blood, a man on a bathroom floor, then unresponsive in a simulator hours later, then gone by Thursday evening. The symptoms visible to Keselowski days before that. The progression, looking back, was swift and unrelenting. Richard Childress Racing announced it would retire the number 8 Chevrolet for the remainder of the 2026 season. That Sunday, all 39 drivers who took the green flag at the Coca-Cola 600 carried a black number 8 on their cars. The race Kyle Busch had won before. The race he had been preparing to run again 3 days earlier. NASCAR is a sport built around danger. Fans understand that crashes happen. That risk is part of the contract. But this loss came from somewhere no safety wall or Hans device could have stopped. It came quietly. Most people push through when they feel sick because stopping feels like losing. If you've ever ignored something serious because you didn't want to slow down, this story will stay with you. There is a certain kind of athlete who never quite accepts that the story might end. Kyle Busch was that kind of athlete. He was in his 22nd full-time Cup Series season when he died, still competing, still signing contracts, still telling anyone who asked that retirement wasn't something he was thinking about yet. The numbers he left behind are not the kind that get broken easily. According to NASCAR.com, his 63 Cup Series wins stand as one of the most decorated individual records in the sport's modern era. His 234 total victories across the Cup Xfinity and Truck Series remain the most by any single driver in NASCAR history. He won the Nationwide Series championship in 2009. Cup titles followed in 2015 and 2019. He was, as recently as 2025, the highest-paid active driver in the sport, with a yearly salary estimated at $16.9 million from Richard Childress Racing, according to Front Office Sports. He was not winding down. He was still near the top of the pay scale, still racing full schedules, still chasing wins. His son Brexton turned 11 years old in 2026. The boy Kyle had publicly named as his reason for staying in the sport. The plan was to keep racing until Brexton was old enough to compete at the national level. To be there, still driving when his son arrived, that plan ended in a hospital in Charlotte on a Thursday evening in May. The Samantha and Kyle Busch Bundle of Joy Fund continues to operate. The foundation he and Samantha built from their own private pain still carries his name and his purpose forward. At Charlotte Motor Speedway that Sunday, the drivers who had spent years trading paint with Kyle Busch, who had been booed alongside him, cheered against him, complained about him in press conferences, and praised him in the same breath, climbed into their cars and raced, all 39 of them carrying a black number 8. Kyle Busch was not a man who wanted to be remembered quietly. He wanted more laps, more wins, more seasons, but the sport remembered him the only way it knew how, by driving. Kyle Busch's story doesn't end here. His son Brexton is already racing, and the weight of that name is something number 11-year-old should have to carry alone. That story is next